everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of our LinkedIn Live series. I am Taryn McKenzie. I'm the EVP here at Talent Smart, and we are located here. So before we get going, if you could just drop into the chat, say hi, let us know where you're located, maybe what organization you're a part of, and we'll just kind of give it a minute to let everyone join. All right, what do we got here? See some folks from San Diego. Let's see. Maryland, New York. It says you're backstage. All right, Bentonville, Arkansas, Texas, North Carolina. Now they're coming in. UK, California, India, St. Louis. Whoa, now it's really coming in. Kansas, Ohio, more Texas. All right, awesome. Well, we will go ahead and get started here. But first, we have some exciting announcements and giveaways. We're going to be announcing some things at the end of this broadcast, so make sure to stay online until the very end. And please be sure to add your questions and comments into the chat. We are going to be giving away some copies of the new book. So let's get started. We have one of the most world-renowned experts on EQ with us. He is the founder of Talent Smart EQ, which is the world premier provider of emotional intelligence assessments and programs around the world. He's the author of several best-selling books, including Leadership 2.0 and, of course, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And today, we are very excited to talk about his brand new book, EQ Habits. So please welcome Dr. Travis Bradberry.
Thanks. Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. So first of all, congratulations, because we just found out it was the #1 new release at airports across the country. So congratulations to that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. So before we jump into the book, tell us about this whole EQ journey for you.
Yeah, for me, I first learned about emotional intelligence as an undergrad. So that was Peter Salovey's work at Yale. And it really intrigued me, the concept. And I started graduate school shortly thereafter. And when I was in graduate school, I did a dual PhD in clinical and industrial psych. So I studied the business side of psychology and the clinical side of psychology. And I really felt that emotional intelligence melded those two fields really well. It just brought them together in a nice way. And before long, I went to kind of a small school. I was known as the EQ guy.
Nice. I like it.
Around the hallways, because I started doing a lot of research with emotional intelligence.
That's awesome. So tell us about the book. What is the book about?
Well, Emotional Intelligence Habits is a book that's really about changing your day-to-day behavior to increase your EQ. The book focuses on small things that you can do every day that have sort of this growing compounding effect on real-world outcomes.
I love that.
The book is dedicated to actions you can take, things you can do to improve your EQ. It's all action-oriented. It's all action-based. It's very, very how-to.
That's awesome. And so obviously you wrote Emotional Intelligence 2.0 many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to write this book? Why now? Why habits?
Yeah, honestly, the biggest motivation for me writing habits was I was sitting on a lot of really good material, and I felt a little bit negligent not putting it out in book format. I know that with Emotional Intelligence 2.0, the thing that readers like the best about that book are the strategies, the how-to portion.
Yes.
And I had spent 14 years since that book came out, conducting additional research and doing all that sort of exploration of this how-to side of emotional intelligence. And I really felt that it needed to be put into a book format so that people could read and pick and choose what they wanted to work on and what they wanted to change.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. One of the things working at an emotional intelligence company is I feel like when people find out, what we do, they're like, oh my gosh, it's needed more now than ever.
Yeah.
Why do you think emotional intelligence, I know it's been around for a while, why do you think it's needed now more than ever?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been hearing that since, for a couple of decades.
Right.
And I think that what you're tapping into is sort of a fundamental truth, a fundamental aspect of how we operate as people.
Yep.
So it's always needed now more than ever. There's different challenges in the world around us and our own lives where our EQ is tested, and I think that's why it's something that so resonates with people and is so salient for people when they get exposed to it.
And what about in the workplace? I know people, can experience dramatic changes in their improvement with EQ at home and in life and relationships. But tell me about, what do you see the impact of the workplace with EQ?
Well, I had a lot of years being really exposed to that firsthand, and the impact is pretty tremendous, especially when it comes to leadership skills and how someone performs as a leader, sales performance, so how someone performs in a sales role, and teamwork, I think, is the other big thing. When we see, I talk about in the book about this, that emotional intelligence is a tree, basically, and when you water the trunk, a lot of things branch off that you may not have been expecting. It affects a lot of different areas. And that's what I see is when people are working on their EQ, they operate better as leaders. They're more team oriented, and there's more harmony amongst teams. And then certainly if you're, it could be cross-departmental selling, it could be traditional selling to clients. It has a really big impact on people's performance there.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And we see the same thing, with our training. So talk to me about, if someone has read Emotional Intelligence 2.0, tell me about the comparison between these two books. Do they need to read both? Should they start there and then read this book? What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I think they should certainly read both. The thing about Emotional Intelligence 2.0, I mentioned that people really love the strategies. And Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is a very small book. So the strategies are maybe 20,000 words. I think this book has over 100,000 words of strategies. So you're just getting more of that.
Yeah.
But they're certainly complementary, and I think that I know that people can't get enough of the strategies, so that's kind of the idea, is having it in some book.
One of the things you spoke about in the first chapter that I really loved is this concept of kind of bringing it all together. So in other words, with Emotional Intelligence 2.0, you really kind of focus on the 4 key pillars of emotional intelligence. But with this book, it's really about kind of pulling it all together, because in any given moment in time, you might have to flex, and some of it is self-management, some of it's self-awareness. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah, so in Emotional Intelligence 2.0, the strategies are structured by EQ skills. So there's 4 EQ skills: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And this book is oriented differently. It's oriented to outcomes. So you choose what it is that you want to achieve or realize in your life. It could be dealing with a toxic person. It could be increasing your productivity, likability, confidence, persuasion, communication skills, spotting a liar. I mean, there's 37 different areas or outcomes that you would want to achieve. And then the chapter actually addresses all 4 of the EQ skills in helping you to develop the habits, because they're very intertwined.
Right.
So it's a little bit, it's a bit of a rough cut. It's a bit unrealistic to say that this strategy only applies to this EQ skill, when really most of them apply to all 4.
Yeah, that's great. And so, there's an assessment included in the back of the book, which, we obviously have one of the world's, greatest assessments for EQ in Emotional Intelligence 2.0. If someone's taken that assessment, talk to me about what you get with this assessment. Is it the same assessment? Is it the same report?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's the Emotional Intelligence Appraisal was published in 2001, and it's been the same 28 items ever since.
Yeah.
It's very widely used. A lot of people know about it. So you're getting that test. What's unique to the book is in your results report, it's analyzing your score profile, and it's telling you which chapters of the book you should focus on first. So basically, you're going to get the most out of your emotional intelligence development by focusing on this chapter, then this chapter, then this chapter.
Yeah, I love that.
And if you agree with the recommendations, you can dive right into those chapters. If not, you're welcome to read something else in the book. There's plenty of options, but that's what's unique about the assessment. It's pinpointing which aspects of this book you want to explore based upon your unique score profile.
Yeah, I love that. And so, is this a book that you see people kind of reading cover to cover, or is it one of those things where, okay, I'm dealing with a toxic person and I jump to that chapter, or I take the assessment and it says, okay, I really need help working with managing stress, so I read that chapter.
Mhm.
How do you see people utilizing this book?
Yeah, it was really designed to be sort of a choose your own adventure kind of book
I love
where
those.
where you pick what it is you want to work on today or reread or explore something new. I mean, it can be read cover to cover,
Yeah.
but if you read it that way, you're going to be the metaphor I like is drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Right.
So, but it depends on the individual, I suppose.
Yeah. So we talked about kind of at work and how emotional intelligence can be so crucial in that side of things. But one of the things I love is when we train people and they come back to us and give us feedback and they say, you know what? Yes, that made me a better leader. It made me a better teammate. But it also helped at home, and it also helped with my communication skills and navigating my, relationships at home too. I love how you separated the book, and really you have two distinct sides. It's kind of like at work and then at large.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that and why you decided to make that distinction.
Well, again, because the book is very outcome focused, it's helping people to choose which area of their life they want to work on. And some aspects of the workplace section of the book are very unique, leadership skills or sort of being persuasive in a work environment is a lot different than at home. And some of the other stuff is more very personal life focused. I think they bleed into each other a lot, but it was a nice way to segment the book and let people sort of focus on which area of their life they're kind of addressing today.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So as you release emotional habits into the world, what do you want people to walk away with? What impact? I'm really big right now in like leaving your legacy. Like, you've done such a great job of kind of this EQ, leaving this legacy, but what impact do you want this book to have?
Yeah, I've in the emotional intelligence world, I'm kind of known as sort of the how-to guy, the rubber meets the road, where the rubber meets the road. I might not be the most come from the strongest academic background or what have you compared to some of the other folks in the field. And before this book came out, I always felt like I hadn't done enough in that regard.
Interesting.
And that's really was the impetus for the book, is I just felt like I was sitting on a lot of great material, a lot of stuff I had written about and been exposed to, and it just needed to be encapsulated in book form so that people could utilize it. So I suppose that's really the crux of it.
Yeah, and you have such a unique, almost storytelling component. Have you always been a writer, or how did that all infuse together with kind of your expertise with EQ? But you just have a really kind of natural, comfortable writing style.
Yeah, I suppose 7 books you'll get there.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm still working on it.
Yeah. But no, it definitely took some work. I mean, I wasn't an English major; I was a psych major.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, practice makes perfect, I suppose.
Yeah, awesome. We're going to open it up to see if anyone has any questions. So if you have any questions for Dr. Travis Bradberry, please put them in the chat. I have not been monitoring it, so I see that there's lots of things. Let's see. Jody, do you? Oh, there we go. I think there's a delay on my end.
Mine too.
Yeah. So someone asked, what do you like to do beside work? What have you been working on? What's your world look like?
Yeah, besides writing and spending time with my family, it's a lot of surfing. Yeah,
nice.
It has been for a lot of my life, and now that I'm semi-retired, it has given me a lot more time for that.
Nice, awesome. Someone said this is such a great resource. I took the fire hose approach and read a chapter or 2 daily, so thank you, Jordan. Lee says, I need this book because I believe it will help me a lot. I'm presently facing a very toxic manager. I'm also going through some things. I seriously need to know how to manage my relationship. What would you say if we had a few tips on how to deal with toxic people? I know there's a whole chapter dedicated to it, but what are some of your best little suggestions for dealing with toxic people?
Yeah, there's a chapter dedicated to toxic people and another dedicated to toxic bosses. And both of them detail the different toxic types that you run into, because you want to have a good understanding of what you're dealing with or who you're dealing with. And then once you have a good understanding, it's really an issue of boundaries is the number one thing. So once you understand, what it is you need to be careful about, you can establish the boundaries that will get you there. I enjoy that comment because a good friend of mine read the book and said that his boss is 6 of the 7 toxic types.
Wow.
That's a
Yeah,
real
not
challenging
good. Time to look for a new job.
It's nice to see people getting a lot out of that part of the book. I really enjoy that part.
That's awesome. And I know another, we do a weekly newsletter, and we've been featuring some snippets of the book. We got a lot of great response from the Beat Stress chapter.
Sure.
And I know, you hear a lot about beating stress and, working on that, but any little insightful hints from the book that you can share with our listeners?
Well, I started the book with the Beat Stress chapter because I think that it's something that basically is a challenge for so many of us, at least it's at times. And I also think it's really the key to high performance, because when you can keep your stress at manageable levels and have the tools in place to sort of be in that optimal zone, your performance really flourishes.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Awesome. Someone asked, is there an audiobook? So the answer is yes, we have an audiobook. It's available in almost every format. So audio, we've got ebooks and everything. Okay, here's a question. Let's see. What are the top 3 things you recommend to build and maintain an EQ culture in the workplace? Coming from Jody.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is an awareness. So it's the idea that we at this organization are making emotional intelligence a priority because it creates a standard for behavior. Second, I think, is assessment, having people get assessed and know where they stand today. Because a lot of people have very unrealistic perspectives of their own emotional intelligence.
Yes.
We all do to some degree. I mean, emotional intelligence hinges on self-awareness. So
yes.
If you are not increasing your self-awareness, you're not increasing your EQ wherever you're at. And then I think the third element to having a high EQ culture is practice, right? Giving people the space and the tools they need to actually work on their EQ and actually make the changes and sort of put it into play.
Great, that's awesome. Jake is asking, what surprised you the most as you were writing the book?
Honestly, that long books are hard. I've always written really short books. I've written 40,000, 50,000 word books. And this one was, it's at one point it was 140,000 words, and I think I got it down to 125,000.
Wow.
But it's a lot of book.
Yeah.
And so that surprised me the most, is that it's like writing 3 books basically for me.
Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious. Okay, Jennifer's asking, how would you suggest individuals to build boundaries when they feel they don't have permission to do so from their manager or their leader?
Well, the boundaries that you build are those that are under your control.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there may be certain things that you want to go to your manager or go to your leader and seek approval for different things you want to establish. But when I think of boundaries, I think of what's within my control.
Yes.
Because it could be, the toxic person, let's go to a home example, it could be a parent. It could be a sibling. There's only so much that you can control. And the important aspect of boundaries is to take ownership of that part of the relationship and actually understanding what you can and cannot do. Yeah,
that's a great point. Kind of similar, Thomas is asking, what can somebody do when walking away is not an option? Such as if you're in the middle of a meeting, what can someone do in the midst of that?
Well, you have to have good tools in place. So, I mean, if you're at the point where you're boiling over and you really wish you could walk away, you better give it some thought beforehand on what you're going to do instead in those kind of situations. Yeah. I think that's the only way to do it. Otherwise, if you don't have a plan B, then you're basically going to do something you regret. Yeah, that's great. Aaron Corcoran is asking, how would you sell EQ to your company? That's a good one. So if someone, and we deal with this all the time actually, when there's sometimes 1 or 2 EQ ambassadors, as we call them, but then how do they get that commitment from their leadership and explain why they should go through EQ training and EQ development? Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of exposure to that over the years. I mean, starting Talent Smart in the early days, it was starting small. And I think the thing that I learned is it's really just about buy-in with the right stakeholders.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a top-down approach. You might have a CEO that reads my book and says, we're doing this. A lot of times it is driven by HR and whoever's in the training function. But sometimes it's more just a grassroots approach. And you have a lot of people in important parts of the organization that are saying, we should do something about this, and then it's getting it in the right hands.
Yes.
To answer the question of how would you sell someone on it, I think the place you start is the business case for emotional intelligence. So it's helping people understand that this is a very performance-driven concept, and that when an organization works on their emotional intelligence, they improve individual and organizational performance. Once you make that argument, then it's a lot easier to focus on the specific skills.
Yeah, that's really what we're trying to do too, is show those connections to the ROI. What matters to the leaders of the company, and say, okay, you're worried about engagement, or you're worried about recruiting the best and brightest. Here's how EQ can help you do those things.
Yeah.
And it really can. It always baffles me when people say, oh no, we're not really focused on EQ this quarter. We're focused on resiliency. Well, guess what? You need EQ to build resiliency. There's been a couple comments about race and diversity, and we do a lot of DEI programs, diversity, equity, inclusion, and some folks on our team have always said, look, you can build programs that tackle diversity, but in order to get true inclusion, making people feel comfortable to speak up, making sure everyone feels comfortable and they have a voice and they feel part of something, that's where EQ comes in.
Sure.
And so it's really hard to build those initiatives on top of something if you don't lay that EQ foundation.
Yeah, I think with DEI programs, if you don't have people that are working on their self and their social awareness, then they're going to have a hard time integrating some of the things that are learning. I think you run into a lot of trouble when people lack those skills and they're trying to be inclusive and understand, people that may or may not be different from themselves.
Yeah. So speaking of that, Mark is asking, how well does this translate across kind of economically and demographically diverse groups? Are there any challenges you've come up against, or do you feel like EQ is pretty universal across all of those different demographics?
Yeah, I mean, when we've looked at for example, average scores by different demographics, we don't see massive differences. So, like I said, I think it taps into something that's pretty fundamental. Obviously, there's specific examples of individuals using EQ where you're going to have very unique approaches or needs, but there isn't sort of a blanket way to look at it in that regard.
Okay. Susan Fair is saying there's been a big focus lately on emotional intelligence and servant leadership, and we also hear a lot about human-centric leadership. And she would like us to talk a little bit about how these two topics dovetail together.
Yeah, well, I think it's, so we're talking about, we've mentioned real briefly, it's hard to be resilient without EQ. It's hard to understand another person from a DEI perspective without EQ. And servant leadership is another example where if you really want to be a servant leader, you're going to have a hard time achieving that without emotional intelligence, right? You're going to have a hard time developing the humility and the self-perspective and the understanding of other people and their needs without those 4 core EQ skills.
Right.
I know that, some of the companies in the training space that are real focused on servant leadership, we've always had a really complementary relationship with them because of that, because they go so well together. Yeah,
that's great. What else? And if there's any last questions, throw them in. What do you want people to walk away from this session, and more importantly, after reading the book, what do you hope people get out of this?
Yeah, when you put a book out, there's always kind of that moment where you've been working on something in relative isolation, and then you put it out in the world and you get to see what people think. I always felt like in writing this book that if people don't get a lot out of it, then I really don't understand what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that's really what I would hope for, is that people would read it and get a lot out of it, because I think that, for me, the content in the book, it's the kind of things that I'm working on and applying every single day. Sure. I get a lot out of it myself, so I hope that other people feel the same way.
That is great. So Dr. Bradbury, it has been so great chatting with you. I'm going to ask everyone to stay on the line. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with the new book. It's been such a pleasure working with you. So as I mentioned at the start, we're going to be offering a few folks some free books. So please, if you want to drop your name in the chat, we are also going to offer everyone who has listened today a free printable guide with the top 10 EQ habits from the book. So we will drop a link in the PDF in the chat. So we are going to do that right now. Plus, we just started a very unique opportunity. We have brand new workshops that we are literally taking some of the key content from the book and incorporating it into these training workshops. The first one is all focused on well-being, and we picked 3 chapters: managing stress, dealing with toxic people, and developing a growth mindset. So we've got 3 different sessions for the first well-being workshop, and we are going to drop that into the chat. So feel free to check out that link and you can sign up. It's a first come, first serve. And finally, let's pick a few people. Hold on one second. We're dropping in the links. We're dropping links, making things happen. Also, if you don't win today, the book is now available on Amazon and every local retailer. It's in all the airports nationwide. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and flew multiple airports to get here to San Diego and saw it all over, which was really, really cool. So we will drop the link in the chat as well. So we are going to pick 5 individuals, and I'm just going to look through and see who has been active on our chat. Let's go with, let's see. Amy Maple, you are the first winner, and we will put an email address. If you could please send us an email with your shipping address, and we will send you a free copy of the book. So Amy Maple, you are our first winner, and I'm just picking randomly. Yep, go ahead and throw it. I won't see your name unless you put a comment into the chat. Let's go with, let's see, what do we got? Keith Rogers. You are the next winner, Keith Rogers, if you're still on. Susan Falk, is it? Fair, sorry, Susan Fair. Let's do Erin Corcoran. And we need one more. Let's see who put their name in at the end here. Michelle Kutch. Let's go with a guy. We better. Let's do Michael Peralta. So those are our winners. Thank you all so much. If you need more information, please email us. We've got lots of links in the chat, and you all have been very active on chat, so you might have to comb through it. But Jody's going to put some key links in the chat. One is for your free printable guide with the top 10 EQ habits. One link is going to be for our new public workshops that we're going to be featuring. And then one is to purchase the book at Amazon. So thank you again, Dr. Travis Bradbury. It is always a pleasure. Really appreciate the time. Thank you to everyone. And we will see everyone back on September 28th. That is our next LinkedIn Live session. We will be discussing the secret to building diverse and inclusive work cultures, which is something that a lot of you are interested in today. So that will be on September 28th. Be sure to join us. Until then, thank you, everyone. I'm Taryn McKenzie. I really appreciate it, and we will see you next time.